Welcome to the Franchise Founders Podcast. We are on a mission to help aspiring entrepreneurs just like you take action through franchise ownership,
allowing you to obtain more financial freedom, time with family, and ultimately a business that can run on its own without you.
Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Founders Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today's a special episode because I've got a guest and longtime friend, Tom Spadea, on the show, live and in person in the studio. How are you, Tom?
I'm excellent. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was
cool. Nice setup you got here.
Yeah, it worked out. We can do a podcast and get a day in the city.
I love it's not the Dan driving down the road on LinkedIn with the phone going, but
I've graduated.
Nice.
Still do that too. Tom and I go back all the way to 2000. For me, 2014. Your time in franchising has been since probably
a long time, right? When we still use the abacus. I've been in franchising for 20 years now. Actually, I started as a franchise consultant, broker, and business broker. That was prior. That was my first entrance into that. It was before I was a lawyer. So I actually, I sold franchises. Then I joined a brand as I was with Rita's Italian Ice, Rita's Water Ice. They had just been acquired by private equity in 2005. And so they brought me on to sell franchises. I moved up the ranks. I spent a couple years there. I was the head of franchising. I was the head of real estate and development. And I went to law school at night. So I was selling franchises during the day, and I was going to law school at night when I was in my late 30s, and it's great. So I joined the IFA, I got my CFE, finished up law school, did a couple other sort of tours of duty in franchise sales with a couple other big brands, and then started the firm with my best friend from high school, Josh Liana, and Josh and I started. I got out in 2010. He did 2011. We started the firm 2012, so 10 years ago. 11 years ago. Now we're on to our 11th year. In the beginning, mostly represented franchisees. We did lease review. Well, we were a startup business, so we mostly did anybody who would write us a check and came in the door is how it really started. And with all my friends in franchising, with my franchise sales and development background, we helped, people navigate the FDD, really get in. So, our kind of base perspective is from what do franchise buyers look for? What are they thinking about as a first-time business owner? So setting up their entities, doing the FDD review, doing the lease. And over time, we started, picking up franchisor clients. And now, actually last year, we've made a 100% pivot to just representing franchisors. In mostly the regulatory work, writing the FDDs, the state register, all the blocking and tackling boring stuff that you don't think about until there's a problem, or you don't think about until you're thinking about a big exit, which is really kind of our mission, is to help people towards that.
Yeah, and it makes complete sense to me, and it's always stood out to me in all the years of knowing you that you have that background in franchise development, and that you can apply that to your legal side of your business. So you got into franchising, and I think it was just to get back in this story a little bit. It's exciting. Rita's, right? Rita's.
I was with Rita's. I'm a Philly guy. I'm wearing my green in mourning of the Super Bowl loss here, and so it's a great brand. Philly based, was around for 20 years. They got up to 300 units without ever using consultants, without ever advertising for franchises. Little sign in the window: franchises now. Takes 20 years to get to 300. So I joined them right after they had private equity, had bought them, and obviously put them on kind of a growth path.
Gotcha. And then law school, and
I went to law concurrent. So I went to law school at night.
Yeah.
So
right.
I would, those of you who know Philly, I would leave, Ben Salem, which is right north of the city, and I'd, get there at 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd leave at 5:30 to get the class at 6 o'clock, class till 10. And, God bless my wife. My wife, Monica, is the one who her name should actually be on the diploma, because that was a lot of patience that we went through. Sunday night, I had, at the time, my kids were 4 and 1. So I'm saying, good night to the kids Sunday night, and, I'll see you Friday.
Yeah.
So it was a long haul, but it was tough for the first 2 years. Then you kind of could get into the schedule, but I loved it. I actually I'm kind of like a nerd at heart. I really enjoyed law school. I think because I did it late in life, I like to get into the details. I mean, it's fascinating from kind of a history buff. And so I kind of think about how, at the end of the day, a huge part of our country, our whole economy, our whole political system, our business system, it really all revolves around, the law.
Yeah. It's funny, just on a sidebar, because Coral and I have lived together now for almost 2 years. And it was an adjustment because she had said, I didn't really fully understand how obsessed with franchising you were until we lived together. And she sees me on a Saturday morning literally reading like an FDD, or like just watching on YouTube on the couch. Like,
Yeah, franchise nerds.
Granted, we live, someday we live in a 1-bedroom in New York City. So maybe someday we'll get me a man cave where I can do that. But you were living and breathing franchising, selling franchises, and going to law school. Well, going to law school, but then becoming a franchise attorney.
Look, I love franchising, right? I always say I'm not super broad with a lot of my knowledge base, but I go real deep and it's real narrow. And I love entrepreneurs, right? We're the founders law firm. That's how I always like to say that. Like when people, we the big private equity firms, the big public companies, that's not who we represent, and nothing wrong with that. It's just a different mindset.
Yeah.
Is where I feel my grandfather started a small company after World War II. He had a 7th grade education. He was a Marine in World War II, got the GI Bill, couldn't really get a formal education, but he used that to get an engineering degree. He became a machinist, really was an engineer without a title, without a degree, but had all the classes. And so he started a machine shop, and my dad joined that company. I did. So I'm really like a 3rd-generation entrepreneur. I grew up in a house talking about making payroll and getting through this and dealing with employees and dealing with all of the stress that comes along with a small business. So, yes, I understand the formality of it. Yes, I understand, how the nerd part of me can get into these documents and get down to the crossing the T's and dotting the I's. But the part that I think is sort of in my DNA is why I bond with founders. I'm a founder. I founded my law firm. We're pretty proud of the journey that we have. And the success that we've had and the awards that we have had as a franchise law firm. So I think I've really finally, right, at 50 years old, I know what I want to do with my life. And I have found, I've really found my niche. And I love it. I get to deal with founders, as you are, and entrepreneurs every day.
Yeah, I've always appreciated your understanding of business because of running your own firm. And I think you were actually the person that first recommended to me to read the E-Myth years and years ago. And I remember going home and reading it and saying, wow, that book changed my life.
It is. Anyone who's watching this who has not read the E-Myth and is in small business, it is a must read.
Must read for sure.
At least twice. And the basics of it, for those who will now be reading it soon, is the key to scaling a business. And franchising is like the ultimate embodiment of that mindset. How do you build a team? I take it to heart, even the way our structure and our firm with our flat fees and our team approach with client relations. What are you doing in your business that you can delegate and not just be the technician, not just be the person in there? That's the key. So thank you for that. Very cool.
Well, yeah, it was. I think during the day you told me about. It was at the Murphy conference. So this is a while ago.
Is that in Reno?
It was in Reno.
When we had that steak.
Oh, I was about to tell you because I was also not accustomed to these types of steak dinners yet. I was just out of college. I was used to eating pizza. So my first steak dinner, business dinner, was with you, and I ordered the blue steak, and I liked it because I like rare, but I don't think I knew what I was doing.
I remember that. That was very fun. We went bowling afterwards, I think. That was a long time
I can't
ago.
remember who else was at that dinner. It wasn't just you and I. There was other.
I forget now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
But it was a good steak dinner. So, all right. So, and I know from my experience, when I was running my previous company, we would send a lot of candidates that were looking for a legal. And of course, we send them to many different firms, because it wasn't our place to decide for them. But we would send them to your firm at that time when you were working with franchisees, because I always found that you understood how to make things simple, for people to understand. So I know now you don't work with franchisees really at all, or sparingly.
No, we don't, but we take that same philosophy, right?
Yeah.
So I look at franchising not as necessarily a game of one side against the other. I look at franchising as two parties coming together, who both have a need. From a business standpoint, representing just franchisees, taking the E-Myth to heart, it's hard for us because the reality is if you're a franchisee and you buy just a service business or a food franchise or a gym, you're going to use your attorney to, do your entity, look at your franchise agreement, your lease, maybe some ancillary work. But the reality is if you're a micro entrepreneur that's a franchisee and you're calling your lawyer every month, that's a problem. So the franchisor side of things, however, there's this ongoing flow. So we're able to become really subject matter experts in the part that for a lot of my competitors, I think they treat as low margin headache work, the FDD, the blocking and tackling. So we have I think I've shared with you, like our tech stack that gives people a map and they know exactly where they're registered and they have access. When we get an answer from New York, it pings the system and they see it, our attorneys see it, our paralegals see it. And so, the way we bill with our flat fee, we've tried to simplify the process the same way we simplified the franchisee process. We've tried to do that for franchisors.
So let's get into this. A lot of our listeners are franchisors. They're looking at, maybe they already did their FDD. They're working, something that you clarified with me before the recording started was like, I know for me, like I had said, hey, look, like there's, I'm almost done with my FDD and, ongoing. And I think people may think of like, at least I have a habit of thinking my attorney is my attorney for everything. And I'm realizing that it's actually not the case. You should be delegating different areas to the specialist in an area. Obviously, my attorney is a franchise attorney, but you had said that, like, look, for the ongoing work.
So you think about it like doctors, right? So you have your general practitioner. In fact, the reality is our system works best when people have other subject matters. Even if you're a startup franchisor, you have your corporate attorney. They know you. They've met you. They've talked to you. They understand your goals. Not that we won't also understand that, but you go to your doctor and you have an earache and you have a problem and that doctor's going to do kind of a rudimentary look on that. But if they can't quite get it or they're not, then you go to the ear, nose, and throat guy, and they have this giant machine that can go in, and they have the right tools for that specific issue that a general practitioner isn't going to have. And that's what we are. We're specialists. I mean, we refine our offering as lawyers. We were technically, you're not specialists because we don't have the special training, but we're basically very laser focused on. We stay in our lane. So we have a number of clients, even larger clients, still mostly founder run, but larger clients that have general counsel. And we're a force multiplier to their own lawyers. So that, if you have a litigation specialist or a trademark specialist or a corporate lawyer, it's not efficient to spend $500-600 an hour, $800 an hour, $900 an hour for them to be responding to a Minnesota comment letter. It's not efficient for them to be talking about a run-of-the-mill addendum for you just to get deals or to go through and to be talking about, is this how the item 19 should be and crossing the T's? And the fact that we have, 400 brands that we represent. Go ahead.
No, it's interesting because I just think for my own personal, like I was just saying pre-recording at the time of this recording on Friday night, I finished the acquisition documents and signed, moving forward. Thank you with the founder of the business that we got involved with. That we have an amazing relationship, but that deal took 120 days, and the documents were very complex, and there was a need for very specialized, expertise. But when it comes to filing and dealing, like you said, with the letter, that makes sense that you delegate that somewhere where that's what you do. That's where you have the technology. That's where you have the infrastructure and systems to do.
No brand can outrun us. Even if they're with the biggest outsourced franchise sales group, we have taken brands from 6 or 7 units to 200 units, and they didn't outrun us because we have a team approach. So every client gets, a franchise attorney, a paralegal, and a client relations person, sort of modeled off of software. We come up with a flat fee that makes sense for what we're going to do. We recalibrate every 6 months because we track kind of what we did. And I think I was telling you before, we actually don't love raising prices. We would rather, if you're blowing it out of the water and you're doing 4 or 5 deals a month, we would rather teach someone on your team to do some of that. Maybe it's an administrator who has a great attention to detail. Hey, we should do the first couple because they're going to take time, but we're not going to be able to respond in 3 hours like an internal person for a salesperson. And now this comes to my background of I've sold franchises. Time kills deals. So you have to be ready to run really fast, strike where the iron's hot. And I love that. I love setting those systems up.
I'm not sure I fully understand, so this will be helpful because if
Yeah.
others. So I've got 3 candidates in this hypothetical situation that are pretty close to wanting to move forward this month. They have comments on where are they going?
So, all right. So
Like, is the legal their
So here-
attorney is
so
coming to us with
pull
comments?
it back, right? FDD's done. We go to our states, state registrations. You and your franchise development people get this web, basically a private website that says where you can sell and where you can't. If you use our disclosure system, which you get as part of it, some people will use these other really great CRMs, the Frank Connects of the world, and the other good ones out there that that's fine. We'll load the FDD there. But if you use our system, you'll send out a map link. A map shows up to the candidate. They click on their state. It's green or red, right? Josh and I were at Fogo de Chao, and we were sitting there, green and red, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, that's a great idea for state registration.
Yeah,
so
right.
keep it simple, right? Keep it simple. That's what we try to do. Simplify. So they click, they get the FDD, they sign it through DocuSign. You're training the client to sign DocuSign. You're getting them through a process. They're getting used to it. If you have a problem with their technology or their access, it's a lot better to learn it on the receipt page than when it's like money's on the game. So they get the document. Now we go forward, discovery day, they're there, they're ready to go. Dan, I want to do the deal. So we have another form through DocuSign, or we'll come up with a form that we'll work together on the way you want to pass us the info. And part of that pass of the info is about the time that they'll say, hey, here are my comments. Now I will tell you, and those clients, if I have clients here who work with us and our team, if the candidate sends in 50 clients, you haven't trained that client on what franchising is. So we will tell them.
So if they send in 50 what?
If the franchisee hires a non-franchise lawyer
And they send in 50
and they
comments.
send in 50 comments,
Gotcha.
we recalibrate and say, this is not the path you want to go down. You
With their attorney, you communicate
with their
this.
attorney, you communicate. Well, we'll communicate to you, we'll communicate to the attorney. Usually what I say is pick your best 20 that you want us to even look at. We're not trying to be mean here, but we're not going to torture because you don't understand franchise. Now, when you're an emerging brand, you get it. You have to move it, but you can't just give 50 comments away to everybody. And then we tell them, pick your best 20, and we're only going to probably legitimately talk about 10 of those.
Well, let's just touch on this for a moment because I want to make sure I really understand on a granular standpoint. One, I already had people say to me like, oh, Dan, when you start your franchise, are you going to give all kinds of things to give new people? And I said, no, we're not giving anything other than like we're going to give them a great territory that's going to be available. And we're going to give them an opportunity to be a pioneer and communicate with us. And there's obviously the best franchise agreement you sign is the one that's available now because every year it gets a little bit more strict. It should because you're growing. But outside of that, no, we're not going to do a million things because it's not fair, even though you are the first to get in.
I agree.
So my question is, if I'm a franchisor and I'm working with you and my candidate brings 50 comments, your team communicates with their attorney?
Not first. We're going to coach you on that. Now,
Understood.
not every brand has Dan.
And
Not every brand has been around. Most of our brands have never sold franchises before. They're new to the business. So we're going to coach them on, it shouldn't get to us, actually. The 50 comments shouldn't get to us.
This is important too. Most of our listeners are franchisees too, or
Gotcha.
potential franchisees. And what we're saying here is that franchise agreement is pretty standard. It has to be. If you're going to a franchisor and they're wheeling and dealing and striking things out, I would run away from that.
I would tell my franchisee, when we represented franchisees, so speaking to the franchisees in the audience, I would tell a franchisee, first of all, you don't understand what you're getting into if you want 50 comments. You're not negotiating a lease. You're leasing a car. You're not buying a car. You can't paint it purple. You got to bring it back on time. Now you're going to be able to buy way more car or lease way more car than you could if you bought it. So think of that analogy, but there are restrictions and there are rules. And you're buying into a system. In fact, I would say a franchisor who entertains 50 comments, you should run away from that franchisor because you're investing in the brand. It's you. It's the franchisor and it's the brand. And I would tell, and then I would say, because that was pretty good as a franchisee lawyer. I got a lot more stuff than the people who asked for 50. Because if you laser focus and you ask for 7 or 8
Right.
that really matter, that are really going to impact. And look, we've done, I've seen these things all the way out through litigation, private equity, every fight. I mean, that was not a, thank goodness, at this point in my career, I've seen every angle of every one of these clauses negotiated, fought over. They care about it. Franchisors got to worry about the end game. How's that going to turn out in private equity at the end? They got to think about that. And you as a franchisee have to think, if I'm not going to follow the system and I'm going to be pulling out the franchise agreement, then maybe this franchise isn't for me, or maybe franchising is not for me.
That franchise agreement should get a file cabinet locked away and never thought about it again. But what I think is outside even the private equity component, it's more about like I'll give you an example. This is something I learned recently. I had said on a mastermind with franchisors that like my plan when I do agreements is to write them in a way that favors me, but I'm always going to be very very compassionate with what we can and what we will or won't do. Someone gave me a different opinion though. They said, "Well, Dan, how are you going to determine when you're being compassionate and when you're not? You don't want to be favoritism." And their advice was to be consistent, right? To be consistent with
I
people.
agree with that. You should be consistent.
Now, of course, if someone has an outstanding circumstance, I think that as a leader, as a franchisor, requires compassion. And
Well, you just hit the word that's really important. And for the franchisees to think about that. You're the leader of the brand. You're the coach and they're the players. You're a benevolent dictator. And so you have to, it's a lot easier for a franchisee to leave the system. But it's really hard for you as a franchisee,
Right.
as a franchisor, to get the franchisees out of the system. So they have to, right? Empathy, sales, empathy, that, being a lawyer, being a dad, you have to understand the other side of things. So the franchisees going into it should understand that, well, there's some needs on the other side here, because a healthy system builds their investment. A healthy system grows their investment. So so you hit the nail on the head, and you should talk about that to the franchisees as franchisors. And franchisees should understand that. This is your leader. This is your coach. A strong leader is going to make a stronger system, and it's better for your investment. So if the franchisor is so desperate to make a sale than to sell a franchise, you should be like, that's a warning sign. That's a warning sign to me.
Yeah, we'll move on to the next topic, but I just remember a time I had a candidate work with a non-franchise attorney. They carved out at 50 comments, and then at the end, when it finally got to the territory, which I felt like could have been negotiated, the brand, the system was so worn out. They're like, no. And I feel like none of those comments really even ended up getting agreed to. Like you said, they would have been better off leading with the territory.
And then sometimes what happens is the franchisee has to make this like Sophie's choice between listening to their lawyer, which you should, by the way, right? And I know this sounds as a lawyer, but you should listen to your lawyer for sure. And then they have to make this bad choice where sometimes what happens is they're like, all right, I'm just going to sign it as is, fine. And so they get the worst of both worlds. They walk into this franchise completely paranoid that they've been ripped off, because they're thinking, I want this franchise so bad. They're not going to negotiate.
Right.
I'm going in. But
Right.
now they got this seed in their head that, oh, maybe there's a problem. And then if there's trouble, they're going to go back to, why did I do this? Why didn't I get the 50 comments? So it just sets the wrong tone. Look, you're a new franchisor. You should be a little flexible. I mean, they're taking a chance on you. They're coming in. There's some Marines.
Sure.
You said territory, though. I will say that's the not to segue it, but we were talking before about the biggest mistake emerging brands make. They give away too much territory.
Give away too much territory.
Way too much territory.
Well, what I meant more so was about like moving a zip code or moving because of some specific market conditions that are understandable could probably be the place there's the most room to negotiate.
Right. But it's the other thing I like to tell them, and this might sound funny, but you're not selling to yourself as a franchisor, because franchisees have a different goal and they have a different risk profile. They want stability. They want a business that's going to provide for their family. Maybe they're going to cobble together a bunch of franchises in different systems and build some wealth that way. But franchisees aren't looking for, they shouldn't be. They're not looking for generational wealth. They're not looking for the huge hit. Look, 80, I don't know what it is, 80, 90% of franchisees, I think, are successful. and 20 to 30% of franchisors really get any kind of scale. So there's a different risk profile. So franchisors have to also understand that when they're crafting their documents, when they're thinking about negotiating, they can be a little tougher because, as counterintuitive as it sounds, most franchisors probably wouldn't sign a franchise agreement. And that's okay. That doesn't make them wrong. It just means they're playing different roles in this ecosystem. And look, we all play a role. I play a role. You play a role. It's a new franchisor. And so I think to understand your role, to understand kind of your why, what's the big game, and that's really always been our approach is, what's the why? Where are you going with this? Why are you doing it?
It's a good point, right? Because like one of the things that I had spoken about in my team was we wanted to be very clear with candidates about what our business was. Somewhere along the lines in franchising in the past, I want to say 4 years, 5 years, I've watched it creep up. I've been very attuned to all the information. And what I found was that all of a sudden there was this belief that a business had to be this multi-$100,000 a year profit. And all of a sudden having a normal business that, like, I don't know about you, but when I started my first business, I didn't make a lot of money. And then the next year we made a little bit more, and the next year a little bit more, and it was a grind. Now that wasn't a franchise, so it should have taken longer. It makes sense. But it did, the business I started did have an audience, so I did get into a business that was able to be easier to stand up. As I start my next business, I purposely went into what I'm doing because I have a certain amount of experience that I can stand it up easier, and people can invest knowing I have a track record. But if you're a franchisee and you're starting a business, there's nothing wrong with starting a business and it being a little hard the first year and a little bit better the second, a little bit third. I just find people in this industry lately have started to come up with these ideas that the first year, you're not going to work. You're going to start the business. It's going to be semi-absentee. It's going to cash flow this amount.
I know this might sound super unpopular, may even irritate a couple of my clients, but I think that this industry has tried to 100% in agreement, lean on that. It's semi-absentee. It's so easy. I don't believe it. And here's why I don't believe it. You wouldn't franchise. Franchisors are looking for two things. They're obviously looking for capital, but they're more looking for human capital. They're looking for the franchisee to be that local expert to drive the brand. And so, yeah, there are some businesses, if you want an absentee business, buy an apartment building, buy a mutual fund. That's an absentee business. But a franchise is you have to get in there and be the boots on the ground. Otherwise, ask yourself, if this is a franchisee, why does the franchisor need you? They can have a lot less grief. They're not dealing with guys like me. They can go raise money and not have to be, trying to herd cats. I mean, imagine 100 hard-headed people trying to get them all pointed in the right direction. That's a hard job. It's hard to be a franchisor.
I look at it like we coined a new term at Franchise Playbook for our brand, which is owner not operated. Owner not operated, something like that. We're still working on it. But like my idea of, I don't even like to use the word semi-absentee anymore. Right. Owner not operated means you own the business. You're not going to operate it. What I get to, this is what I'm planning to say when I have an FDD to candidates. That okay what I said there?
Yeah,
legally?
Yeah.
Okay. When I have an FDD and I have my brand,
you're fine.
What I plan to say to candidates is, look,
we'll beep out any dollars that you start.
Yeah. I'll say to someone if they're listening and they want to talk, I can not promise, but pretty much guarantee, if you say you never want to go in the house, you never want to ride in the truck, you never want to...
E-myth. Go back to that.
If you don't want to be the technician...
So I 100%, but you got to lead the business. Right. You got to be on top of it. You have to know your numbers. You have to be the one who is thinking about this business.
So if you ask me what, like, my definition, listen, if you're talking about you want to go to a B&I event, then go meet with the property manager, then go drop off cookies at your other property manager, go meet with your guy for lunch on your team, go and then, sell and do a little bit of management, then go next morning, look at QuickBooks and look in the bank account or look at the marketing. That's semi-absentee to me.
But they're the best franchisees because they're business people. And I think that's something that a lot of emerging brands struggle with, right? Because they've gone through this E-myth path where they were the best technicians. A teacher should not buy an education franchise. A nurse should not buy a home healthcare franchise.
Right.
You have to think about it objectively and get a team to go in there and execute on the business. But that's that's not semi-absentee. That's work. That's real work. That's the hard work that is hard to do, to go to the BNI events.
Yeah, let's clarify. Absentee means you're somewhat semi-absent from the day-to-day of the business. I'll give you an example. My business right now, and I'm going to have any franchisees, but a lot of stuff going on. Right now, I could sit in this studio for hours, and my team knows that I'm absentee, but I'm doing something to grow our business.
Well,
that would be my definition.
So I would, I don't know. I think you're. I don't think that's what people mean in the industry. I think what people mean in the industry is you can have a completely separate job and you never have to show up.
That's what I'm saying. It's wrong.
That's wrong, and I agree with you.
There's some businesses.
I mean, I guess I'm an absentee business owner. I'm sitting here chatting with you, and I'm about to go to IFA, and
you're semi-absentee,
right?
Because you're doing something to grow the business. If you were right now on a beach every day for a month, not doing anything, that would be
Dan. It's coming. I need more clients, and then we get there.
That would be absentee. That would be right?
Correct. And right. So this is like, go back to another book, right? Which I made my kids both read before I paid for their colleges. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah. Oldie but goodie, foundational book. Another book everybody should absolutely read. Quadrant 2. You're doing things that aren't urgent, but they're really important. Going to a BNI meeting, that's not urgent. It's easy to blow off. If you're in the restoration business and a customer's upset, that's urgent and important. You got to deal with that right now. And if a business owner is sitting in quadrant 1 and they're only dealing with urgent and important stuff, they're never going to grow that business. And so another thing that I think franchisors need to do, and this is why we have back to our structure of having client relations, go back to the why. Are you coaching your franchisees properly? Not which side do you put the ketchup and how many pickles do you put on the burger. That's not the coaching. That's compliance. That's brand standards. That's something the manager should be doing. That's execution. That's following. I mean coaching. I mean thinking about your franchisees as humans, as entrepreneurs. Are they achieving their goal? Are you sitting down with them every year saying, where do you need to be in revenue? Where do you need to be in profit? Why? What's their why? Is it, are we going for college in a couple of years with your kids? Are you not taking enough vacation time? Because some of them buy a franchise because they're burned out in the corporate world and they only want to work 25 hours a week because maybe, I don't know, they're going out for the Olympics. And that's okay too. As a franchisor, just like we want to understand the why of our clients, it allows us to serve our clients better. If I know what your goal is, what your long-term goals are, then we can construct down to the micro level of the documents and the strategy and the planning, the legal structure around that because of your why. That's the first question I ask people. I asked you that, earlier. That's the first question I ask. Well, a franchisor should be doing that also. They should be talking to their franchisees, after they sign and they're up and running. And every year, you should have your business team, your ops team. If you're a founder, it should be you up the first, dozen.
Yeah.
What's your goal? And what are the obstacles that we can remove as a franchisor to enable you to get better? And then you're going to learn from the field and you're going to be more open-minded. And, they're the best systems. They're the systems that I see really explode.
Makes complete sense. I mean, the last thing on this absent, if you said to me, Dan, I want to own this business, I have a GM that's going to be, on the agreement. I'm going to put a little cash in, even if it's $5,000. If they don't have a lot of money, they put $5,000. Something that's going to hurt that if they leave and they're on the agreement, I'm going to keep my job. And every morning I'm going to do this. And every afternoon I'm going to do this. And my GM's going to do that. And that's one thing. But to tell me you're going to just run the business while you keep a job that has no GM, that's no skin in the game. I don't know. And again,
now,
there's not everyone.
You can sell more franchises that way because it's easier for people not to take the full leap and to put a toe in the water. So it's okay for a franchisor to do that, but they have to not kid themselves. They're taking a bigger risk. If they have someone, as maybe sharp-elbowed and mean as it sounds, if you have someone who took an SBA loan, and they quit their job or they got laid off and this is their business and they have an SBA loan that their house is at risk, that's a motivating factor. Not that you want to get down to that, but now you have someone whose whole life, they have to be successful. And, that's what originally drove franchising.
That's what I believe happened, especially in the past few years about this topic, because I think it's a real thing. Because what you just said is so true. COVID hits, right? Employers send their people home. They're in panic. They're at war. I remember I was at war, just like you were. I was just keeping the lights on, right? But people are at home. I can't even think about if they're being productive or not, other than they're doing the bare minimum. I'm in disarray, right? Then I get a PPP loan. PPP loan is provided to me to keep my team afloat. Now, granted, it's a good amount of money. It's covering the payroll. The stipulation is that I don't let them go, right? Which I don't want to, but of course, I also know that if I let them go, I would lose the forgiveness of the loan. And I'm saying me, like a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
So I don't let anyone go. A person over there I notice is kind of not really doing anything, but like it is what it is. I can't let them go because of the PPP money. You get out of COVID, you start to rebuild. Now my business is stronger because I've learned a lot through it, and I'm starting to get more efficient. I'm learning more and more areas that I can improve. But here's the thing. During COVID, the guy that was sitting on the payroll that's not getting let go says, wow, I'm at home and I got plenty of time. I can run a business. And then franchise development person's like, yeah, run this thing, Sammy. I swear, keep your job. I'm going to tell you something right now. Do you really think, like, if I found out right now, the people that I pay a salary to, they could do something, whatever they want later. It's fine. Like, but there was no communication. Oh, well, yeah, during the day, I actually run another business. I paid my life savings into it, and I'm doing this other business. When COVID starts to come back, the employers start to say, come back to work. Well, no, I can't. Well, because they have that business.
Well, hopefully the business is producing enough for them that they don't have to come back to work. But I agree.
Right, but now that COVID shell is gone, I don't think it's so easy to take a business and have a job at the same time. I just think it's very hard.
I agree. I think running a business is really hard. And so I agree. It's harder. So look, our attitude always is our job is to point out risks, point out pitfalls. So I would say to that, it's not that it's wrong or right, but it's wrong to not understand it's different. It's wrong to not understand that there's unique risks. It's just like selling a lot of franchises, right?
You.
So you're totally right.
Yeah.
Neither are wrong or right. It's just you have, as a franchisor, if you're going to do that, well, then you have to recognize that you are giving up something. You're giving up that day-to-day control. You're giving up the engagement, the 100% engagement of the franchisee. You know, you're the franchisee's side hustle as opposed to the franchisee's bread and butter. And so you just have to recognize that and build your training programs around that, build your team around that. So there's a lot of companies that are able to do that, but they can't lie about it. And yeah, I mean, look, franchise development is a sweet spot. That's my personal opinion, right? I guess this would be my non-legal opinion of being in this business for a couple of decades, which that's hard to say out loud, is if you don't sell enough franchises, you're dead. Obviously, right? The wheels come off. You don't have anything. People look at you funny. Well, it's not doing it. Something's wrong. But the corollary to that is if you sell too fast, if you award too many franchises, right? Difference between selling and awarding, and you start to skyrocket, you have to be ahead of the support. So I think they're the two biggest failure points that we see. Obviously, stillborn, they never get started, happens a lot. They just didn't like franchising, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And you know what? If you're a franchisor and you sold 1 or 2 units and you got up and running and you hate franchising, don't stress out because your business is better. You did an operations manual. You took a 360 look at your business. You thought about your business differently. And if you just don't like being a franchisor, that's all right. But the caution is, if all of a sudden you're the next hot thing and you start doing a lot of deals, that can ruin a company just as fast as 0 deals. And it's a way more violent end.
It's funny. Well, first of all, just to clarify, because I have friends that own franchisors that do have people that buy the business that keep their job. I think just for clarity, I don't want those people in my system. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Right.
I just don't want, I believe there's something, and that's the whole point as we launch our brand about the core values, about the grid and like what we're looking for and where we're not going to accept a lot of people. And that's okay. We're not for everyone. There's plenty of businesses that are. And I think you made a great point about it's a decision of risk.
Right.
But what you're saying is spot on too. I joke around. I say we're either going to sell, like a lot of people are going to come to us, or we're going to go slow. And it's one or the other. Both have cliffs. It's like you're on a road that has
You are. Absolutely. That would make like a great cartoon, right? About the cliffs on the side.
Yeah.
You got to hit that sweet spot of development where you have enough development that you can learn and you can get things going. But you got to, and if you're starting to heat up, say no. You have to say no to franchisees, right? Or we were talking before, territory is one of my I would make a good article for our roundup. What are the top 5 things that franchise? I can only think of 2 now that early stage franchisors mess up. One is give away too much territory because your inventory is something that private equity cares a lot about at the end. You're not thinking about that now, but you should be. So that's a deep think. The second one is not saying no because you want to, not saying no because you want to do the deal. And boy, I'll tell you, flip it around. You got to think of yourself as a recruiter, not a salesperson. Yeah. Would you write that person for a $40,000 check to wear your team colors? Are they that talented? Are they that dialed in? And do you think they're going to be that exceptional? That's how you got to treat your first 5 people. I know the economics don't work. A lot of people got to get paid with that franchise fee, but think about it like that. Flip it around in your head because otherwise you'll regret it. Trust me. If they're a bad franchisee, you would pay $40,000 to get rid of them in a heartbeat because it's just those first 5 are the foundation of everything.
Someone once said to me, if they're a pain to work with before they sign and they give you a $50,000 check, they'll be way more of a pain once they did.
Correct.
And so those red flags mutually, franchisor too, if you're on the franchisee side or candidate side, the red flags are going to come out in the final hours. I think the red flags come out in like the last, like when things start to get real.
Yeah, you should be thinking of that. And look, don't lie to yourself. Like if you need to make payroll and you got to do the deal, just recognize you got to go, clean up in aisle 6 at some point. So I get it. And I've counseled that. And I understand that. I can't just sit in the ivory tower here in our fancy studio and say, don't do this, don't do this. That's why I love entrepreneurs. That's why I love founders. Because when the chips are down, you just got to make decisions. You got to be a little bit fearless and you got to just go for it. And, people who haven't lived that, who haven't made payroll, who haven't really struggled with their blood, sweat, and tears, they don't really necessarily understand that. And that's what we love to do is say, here are the boundaries. Fine. If you make a risk, just like the semi-absentee, fine. If that's a risk you want to take, just don't BS yourself. Know that you're taking a risk and you're going to and we're going to have to deal with this later as opposed to putting your head in the sand. And, you got to grow or you're not going to make it.
Yeah. Well, got to give a shout out to the SL Roundup here.
You like that?
Pretty cool.
That is our quarterly sort of newsletter of things. So we do, part of our flat fee structure with our franchisors is we do a ton of education, right?
Yeah.
I do a lot of webinars and a lot of them are internal. We've started posting them. We write a lot of articles, the main article, this one, go big or go home. I think a lot of franchisors, early stage, that'll be number 3 now. They don't tell their franchisees to spend enough money in grand opening advertising. They're going and they're borrowing, make it 10 grand. I only spent 2. Make it 10. They need a strong opening. They're buying stability.
Yeah.
They're willing to do that. So those articles that we have sort of scattered in a lot of the things, we just rounded them up and we put them into this newsletter and we print it up because we think it looks really cool.
That's a great point. If you're a franchisee or someone looking to buy a franchise, you see more and more franchisors put like bundles of advertising into the item 7. Item 7, requiring you to invest into the marketing. And that's because what happens is, and I'll just share, you buy a business. Every candidate has the same 4 questions. How much money can I make? How am I going to get customers? How am I getting employees? How is this business going to stand out in my market? That's the core. Then there's fear and there's leadership team and ancillary stuff, but it's those 4. And then when people buy a business, I don't care what business it is, every first-time business owner has the same challenges. And one of them is, I don't want to spend money on advertising. I'm going to figure out how to do. This was funny, Tom. When I did lead gen, my last company, every single, like 99.999% of consultants would sign up. They'd come to career transition leads. They'd say, I'm going to do these leads. And then I'm going to go out. I'm going to figure out how to do lead gen for myself better than you guys can. Right? And I would joke around and say, I wish you the best. Please call me if you do. I'd love to work with you on that. But I just want to point out there's an entire industry dedicated to this, right? There's me and my team working countless hours to figure this out. It took us years to figure it out. And if you feel like you can do that on your own because with no background in it, then let me know because I want to work for you and I'll leave career transition. And like the point I'm making is that it's a natural indication when you buy a business for some reason, you want to try to get leads your own way.
Correct.
And so franchisors has to realize that they have to help not stop that from happening, but help people
And
succeed.
they have to coach them. They have to coach them from the outset in the sales process that this is what's expected. And they're going to borrow that money. If someone's not buying the franchise because it's $155,000 in item 7 at the top end instead of $147,000, then you have the wrong candidate.
Right.
So I don't buy that. It's an old school mindset. Keep the numbers down. Know who's going to buy this. No way. Go big or go home. Put the money in there. And if that scares away the people that are unwilling to spend, because you are going to be judged as a franchisor on how fast you ramp up. You need to think about that. You need to plan about that. You need to whiteboard that. You need to SWOT analysis that. How fast can you get your franchisees up to break even? That is something that is critical because that's what they're buying. Forget about what you did as a franchisor. That you're describing a franchisor in that explanation.
Oh, well, just
because that's their mindset. How they want to do everything themselves, DIY. Trust me, we have a lot. And if there's any franchisor that also wrote their own FDD or didn't use a lawyer, we don't judge. We're in no judgment zone. You come, we'll fix it. Because we see it all the time. They're just like, I'll write it myself. It's a template, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot that goes.
For clarity, like it's interesting because like as I got into the franchisor side of the business, people say like, you know what you're getting into, and I would say like, look, it's not the same thing, but my experience was people would pay money to join to be a broker consultant, and I loved that business. They would join, and then they would come to purchase leads, and then I ended up really being a big part of their ongoing support, right?
Right.
Because who are you spending money with? You're buying a franchise consultant that buys leads. They're buying them for me at a good amount of money per month of money spent. So I was supporting them because I knew that if you don't succeed, I don't succeed. You're not going to want to continue to purchase these leads. And so I've already kind of been in the shoes of a franchisor because not to the same degree, it wasn't a $150,000 investment.
Let me ask you a question. You saw a lot of people going through in your past life as new consultants. Were the ones who spent a lot of money on leads more successful than the ones who tried to do it themselves?
1,000%. And I used to tell people, I know you might think I'm saying this to you to sell you leads.
Correct.
I'm not there anymore. And I'm telling anyone that's listening, if they're a consultant
100%.
and let's say you're with IFPG, buy the leads, the CTL
Correct.
leads. That's how you succeed.
Spend money. You should have a percentage of your revenue and a percent up front every year that you spend money on. I'm doing it. You're doing it. I'm printing this stuff out. You have to get the word out, especially in this world of this is the podcast that, of course, will have thousands and thousands and thousands of listeners, but there's tons of stuff out there. There's just so much. You got to get the signal from the noise.
We
and
actually
how do you do that?
have a good amount of listeners.
I know. You spend money.
Yeah.
But I'm saying,
Yeah.
but there's so much content. There's
Spending
so
money.
much content.
Yeah.
There's so much. This costs you money.
This costs
isn't
me
free.
money.
Exactly. So, but you're practicing what you preach. So you just have to, it's harder than ever because there's so much content. There's so much things that you have to double down on your marketing efforts, whether you're a franchisee, a franchisor, a franchise attorney, a consultant, anybody in just small business, spend money.
We're off the topic of legal, but just it goes to show, like, if you really know franchising, not just legal, but like, to answer, just a follow up to your question, yes, the consultants that spent money on leads, but then also called right away. So in the other scenario with the franchisee, if they're buying, let's say a home, like let's say you buy the business I'm going to have, let's say you buy a home services business, they have to, like, let's say they handle lead generation for you. Well, then either you have to be calling the leads right away or they have to handle that. I think a lot of, at least in home services, that's like almost become the norm, right? To handle the inbound leads through a call center.
Yeah, depending on their scale. Some of the newer franchisors, it gets harder to kick off with that. But you're right. I mean, speed to calling people back. I mean, it's, time kills deals. Same thing with leads. The world has gotten noisier and faster.
Yeah.
And so you just have to, it's harder. It's harder now to be successful than when I got in this business. I think that franchising, we could do a whole show on that, the professionalization of this. It's harder to be a franchisor. You got to have your A game. People just aren't going to put up with, non-compliance. That's why there was not a franchise law firm like us that we've just narrowed down to that compliance piece because it's just inexcusable. You can't paint outside the lines anymore. All this stuff is exposed. We live in a world where these things stick with you forever. So you need to button yourself up. You need to be professional. You need to show yourself professional, whether you're a franchisee, a franchisor, or a supplier.
If someone's listening to the show, Tom, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably go to our website. I don't know if you're going to flash it. Is it like right down here there? Or, send me an email.
You're getting high tech now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on LinkedIn. I post a fair amount of all this stuff on LinkedIn, but SpadeaLaw.com, SpadeaLaw.com. We have tons of resources. Go there, read stuff, see our videos. We believe in education first. And we also I'm willing to have a conversation with someone. If you're happy with your lawyer, we can do the little piece of that and that. But also, we can be your backup quarterback. If at some point they retire that, we're no problem being the understudy. We'll sit there. I'm very patient. I'm going to be doing this for 20 years, and we have a team behind me that will keep it going. So I'd love to talk to people. I love talking to founders. So give me a call.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Founders Podcast.
If you want our help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business to anything in between, shoot us an email at franchisefounders@gmail.com.